I want to do a review on the ideas and terms that we've discussed in philosophy in the philosophy assignment section of the manuals to this point. We started off looking at semantics and the three principal signs being the icon, the symbol, and the index. The icon being a sign that looks like the thing it's trying to represent. The index being a sign that's part of usually a physical system that indicates an if-then sequence. And so the presence of a cause is going to be a sign of the effect. And then the symbol is just a sign that the culture has decided to accept as a symbol. There's no intrinsic resemblance or logic to it. It's just a symbol we make up, and we assign it to a value, a thing, or a sound. For example, the letter E, a vertical line with 3 horizontal lines. We've just learned that symbol means the sound, the phoneme E, and you can put those together to make words. So we were looking at semantics, which is the study of signs and how messages are developed and delivered from an author through an audience, to an audience through an arena, the 3 A's of semantics. Now, another word for semantics is semiotics. So those are some terms that we've covered early on. I added a fourth. Okay, the fourth that I brought into that, the first 3 terms we just discussed, symbol, icon, index, those are coming from Charles Sanders Peirce, an American philosopher of the beginning of the 20th century. But metaphor, I think, is also a tool we use to convey meaning, right? So I brought that in as actually another type of sign. Some people would say it's a collection of signs, but so metaphor, we looked at metaphor, and you did some study on that. You poetry that really worked on metaphor, and some movies looking at the role of metaphor and how it works in language. The thing that the complication of this happens when you realize that the signs that you are receiving from either the world or an author that you can easily and quickly point at, author meaning the creator of the sign. For example, here in the video, I'm going to be the author of the signage, which is iconic because the computer is capturing an extremely realistic visual representation of me through the pixels and through the way that the device records this information. But obviously you're not getting me. I'm not in your screen. So this is a icon of me, moving icon. And the voice is the symbol, collection of symbols I'm using to convey language, right? To convey a message. However, as you live life, and as you look at the current understanding of optics and how your sensory data operates, the sensory organs receive sensory data, the ear, the eye, the nose, the feel, and the tongue, you realize that it all has to go through chemical reaction, and then the synapses of the nerves as the sensory cells on your tongue, in your nose, in your eyes, the rods and the cones, start delivering the outside stimuli, which could be pressure in the air, the sound waves, or photons coming from a light bulb, from objects, photons being the small atomic particle that carries light, the light energy, the light wave particle. And as these physical entities actually hit our sensory organs or interact with our sensory organs, the nerves cells on those organs start translating that stimuli into chemical and electrical charges that zip right up into our material brain and somehow create something that allows us to operate, allows us to have expectations of movement and of uh, interaction of the world, and to meet those expectations. What I mean by that is, there's a door behind me, and I expect that there's going to be a doorknob, right? Those are the expectations I have, and when I move this way, there it is. You can see the doorknob. The expectations were met. So it allows us to live in this world, but if you think about it, it's all really happening up in your head. And if you look at the modern theory of optics, apparently it's, not, there are theories of aural and olfactory, the way we receive information that way as well. But if you just think about the visual way we receive it, and our current ideas suggest that the lenses of the eyes actually will take the sensory data and allow it to flip, and we are actually living with a scene in our heads that is upside down physically, but we are so used to it that what is upside down in our optic field in here, we have the comfort of sensing it's right side up. So, and this doesn't even touch what it means to be a person, right? I mean, your eyes can sense things, but you believe that you, not your eyes, you are seeing something. So there is also this weird melding of the self with this process. But the complexity happens when you realize that because of the way you are receiving this information, you could be an airplane pilot, if you will, flying an airplane that has no windows. And the only thing it has on the surface are sensory mechanisms that, through wires, the nerve cells, and through an inner screen, show you the world beyond the metal shell that you're in. And that's called mediation, okay? Mediation, because it's in the middle, it mediates. Knowledge that is immediate is mathematical knowledge. For example, 2 + 2 is 4. You don't need sensory data for that. That is automatic and instant. So there are other types of immediate knowledge as well, but that's just one small example. Most of the knowledge that gives us information of the physical world is mediated, which is where the complication comes in, because Descartes didn't like that. Descartes, if you remember the videos on Descartes was had to admit that hallucinations and disconnections could happen. Someone could have the sensory data incorrect and think that red is green, or whatnot, have trouble seeing and recognizing colors or shades, or maybe the sensory data sensory organ is not working at all, and aural signage isn't even impacting a person in the first place because that person is deaf. So these are some normal causes of the breakdown of this system. But what if this is all a dream? What if you don't know it's a dream because you've never woken up from it? And a very famous movie that you'll watch in the next term is The Matrix. 1999, a movie that was way ahead of its time, and really presents well this notion of the problem of mediation, which Descartes, really couldn't get past. And for him, the metaphor was the analogy was one of the evil demon, a powerful being that could implant dreams and visions in your head. And what if this demon, now demon, by the way, if you look at the etymology of the word, has a long history of just meaning spirit, okay, just meaning, angel or spirit. So if you want to disassociate the word from, the devil and his minions, it would be a good idea. Sometimes it's spelled daemon, Daemon, and that's why Descartes actually qualified the term evil demon. If you think about it, he had to add the adjective evil because it had no negative connotation. It just meant a sort of a spirit, the spirit. And so this evil demon is a power that can implant these visions in your head and get and just make everything wrong. Like, this is not the world. The world is something else, but you think it is because this demon is deceiving you. Okay, so Descartes had to, ran with that thought experiment and realized that just about he could be deceived this way over just about everything except mathematics. But you realize that mathematics doesn't tell you much about the real world, correct? Because 2 times 5 is 10, but you don't know what we're talking about. Unicorns, seahorses, oranges, apples, there's no content there. There's just formal equivalencies. And so although mathematical logic is certainly immediate and, as Descartes would say, clear, very clear, self-evident, a clear understanding of 2 added to itself 5 times is going to give you 10. It doesn't carry any content about the world. If we were on Mars, 2 times 5 would still equal 10. So we still don't know what we're talking about exactly when we come up with the mathematical formula. When we want to talk about the world itself, how do you know? What do you know this? How do you know what is real or not? And if you are going by sensory data, looking and seeing and hearing and talking and walking and touching, all of that could be fooled. And don't, all of that could be, ideas engendered in you, sensory perceptions engendered in you by an evil demon that is monkeying with your brain, literally, and just giving you these visions. Now, don't be fooled that you think that into thinking that maybe touching something proves it's there, because I can reach out and touch this bookshelf, okay? But it's very easy to say, well, the vision in your head that the evil demon is putting in there is showing you that another vision the demon is putting in, the bookshelf, is closing in. Those 2 visions are closing in on themselves, and because of the experience the evil demon has told you, that when those 2 experiences overlap, there is a sensation of solidity. But if you think about it, solidity is still just a sensation, because if your whole hand was numb, you would not be able to, you could see the stoppage of the movement, but you would not feel the pressure. The solidity that you feel is not in the bookshelf, it's in the pressure in your hand that goes up into your mind and creates the notion of solidity. So all of that is still a mental creation. I know when I should feel the solidity right there, and I do, because the evil demon creates it. So Descartes was in a pickle and didn't know how to get out of that, right? And he employed a tool called Cartesian doubt. So if you ever hear someone talking about Cartesian doubt, they're talking about Descartes' tool of extreme doubt. Doubt everything that can be doubted and put it to the side. So he basically had to set aside the whole physical world, because he knew that he could be wrong about it. Not only could it just be a dream, just a neutral dream. As you have dreams, and when you wake up, you realize that you were in some sort of mental world that doesn't correspond with the physical world you currently find yourself in. So that's just the neutral, like the better version of it, but a deeper, darker version. And it wasn't a dream; it was a lie, a visual lie given to you by a demon. So all the world goes, and even memories go, because again, memories can be just implanted in you by this demon. So what did Descartes end up with the Cartesian doubt? He ended up with the notion that he existed, and that's all that he could be sure of, because he knew that he had thoughts that could be deceived. But in order for a thought to be deceived, it must first exist. And in order to deceive a thought, or to deceive a mind, if you will, deceive a mind with wrong thoughts, the mind must first exist, right? So you have to be thinking in order to think incorrectly. So that was his way to walk backward into this notion of, hey, I'm thinking. Now, some philosophers disagree with that and say the only thing you proved is that thinking happens. But Descartes was willing to embrace and say, it feels like I'm doing it, so I'm thinking. And because I'm thinking, I know that I exist. Even though my thoughts could be all wrong, at least they are thoughts, and they have to come from a mind, therefore I have a mind. So that's his cogito. That's the abbreviated version of the Latin phrase cogito ergo sum, which is I think, therefore I am. That's Descartes' way to build his meditation his meditations, his philosophy. Okay, and he made some weird steps after that, but it's enough for us to look at Descartes and say, look, not only did he create the Cartesian plane and Cartesian geometry, which you all have studied if you've looked at the x and the y axis, but he also actually truly made the historical flow of philosophy pivot, because all of a sudden it looked like the sure truth was not the revealed truth of the Bible, which for Western history had been accepted as such for the longest time up until then. A lot of people say the modern age started with Descartes because he all of a sudden situated knowledge, empiric knowledge you could measure, knowledge, if you will, scientific knowledge. He shook it up a little bit and said it has to start with the human mind, with what we can be sure of in terms of how we experience the world. So what happened then is all of a sudden you had two problems. Well, you had a division. You had a division into the mind that Descartes said we knew existed, but then you also had this thing that the mind created called the world. Okay, and a lot of people are not willing to say that the world is just a dream that they're having. Some people are, and logically that's a permissible theory. But most people that you're going to meet in your life are not willing to think that way. They want to believe in what's called an objective reality, a reality outside of the subject. And you have the subjective arena, which is going to be your mind, and then you have this non-subjective, what people like to think as a non-subjective arena, the objective arena, which is the world at large, the physical world, tap tap, and where this problem really finds its perfect expression is your body, correct? Because your body is matter, physical, muscles, bone, and yet your mind seems to be located in the body or with the body, connected to the body. We have yet now, see, this is where religious thought can come in, right? But you can't prove religious thought. That's just something that your heart is inclined to believe if you have a heart aligned that way. But many people will say, well, my soul or my mind can exist after my body dies. Now, the scientific approach will say that's a realm that science cannot touch because we can't measure that, we can't repeat the experiment, we can't weigh it, we can't quantify it. So since it's beyond the physical world, we have no scientific knowledge of it. Now, there are some people that think that all knowledge is only scientific knowledge, so they will even go as far as saying we cannot have any knowledge. There is no knowledge about that, and they tend to then skew towards atheism or agnosticism. Well, not agnosticism, just because most religious thought is going to try to center around an intelligent mind, a creator, a God. The best term really is going to be atheistic. But then they also have to deny any sort of mental or spiritual entity that is going to survive the death of the body. All right, if the matter is all it has, all we have, then and science can measure only matter, then we don't really know anything about that, and we shouldn't be talking about it or speculating about it. Of course, most of us realize, no, we have every right to talk and to think about a mental realm or a spiritual realm, okay? But the mind-body problem is the problem that says, how does your mind, which is not physical, right? We don't think of the mind as electrons. We think of the brain as electrons and chemical. But the vast majority of us believe that we are more than our brains because we give ourselves names. And we have memory, and we have a sense of persevering existence, that the existence seems to be persevering. In other words, your identity depending on your age, is now 15 years old, 18 years old, 20 years old, and you can see the future ahead of you. You 25 years old, 30 years old. Your identity is going to persevere. And although your body might change, the skin cells might change out. In fact, every cell on your body might be a different and new cell a year from now. Your self still exists. The I, the ego that is you, the ego, if you want to call it that way. But so how does the mind, which is non-physical, make your body move? Why do you feel like your mind is controlling your body when that which is not physical can never interact with that which is physical, because there's no interface. There's no way for them to interact with each other. There's no common meeting ground. Okay. Now, if you really think about that for a little bit, you should see what I'm talking about. If the only way that you can possibly move something, if this pen, okay, is resting on something like this book, how are you going to move that pen? And if it's a physical pen, right, the only way you can move it is with a force, which is mysterious, by the way. We don't really understand how forces work. Like, we can measure gravity, and we can have mathematical equations that tell us how gravity, where the end motion, where that matter should end up in time as it begins to move towards a star or the center of the earth. But we don't know what gravity is, and we just know this thing happens, and we have some math that can help us predict how the movement happens. But so gravity is actually an occult force that I have a lot of problems with, but that's just me. Okay, once you jump into philosophy, okay, you realize that a lot of the common sense notions we have are actually very problematical, and sometimes it might not be worth seeing the problem, because if you're not willing to battle through the problems, it could have a detrimental effect, which is not good for someone who should be driven to be living the good life, the life lived well, okay, the life lived correctly in pursuit of truth and beauty. So there is a saying that if you are going to drink from the pool of philosophy, you should plan to drink deeply. Don't just take a few sips. You're going to get the ideas incorrect, and you're not going to see the complexity that's really there. But the notion here is you have an object that is made of protons, electrons, neutrons, right? Now you can talk about the plastic molecules, and then you can talk about the chemical nature of the ink. But at the end of the day, it's protons, electrons, neutrons, right? And the only way you're going to move that is with an electrical charge, with gravity, or with other protons, neutrons, electrons combinations hitting it and transferring the inertia, the momentum, from one collection of protons, neutrons, electrons to another. Okay, like this, boom. Okay, but see, your mind is mental. Your mind is not physical. How can something that is not physical, it doesn't have any protons, neutrons, electrons, how can it interact with protons, neutrons, and electrons? So let's just stick this up in your head, okay? Because you have muscles and bones and electricity and synapses, right? All protons, neutrons, electrons. That's what it is, okay? So how can your mind that's hovering interact with those protons, neutrons, electrons? It can't. By definition, it can't. So yet we still feel like it does, right? So this is your mind-body problem. And most people are never going to understand it and never even try to solve it. It's just not worth their time, because it doesn't seem to have any practical effect upon their lives. Whether you understand the mind-body problem, you seem to really know how to wake up in the morning and do a good day, do your day well, and then go back to bed. And you seem to know how to age properly and how to live life. So do you really need to understand this? And I would say that's a fair question. It just depends on how much you want to. It depends on whether or not you can rest easy in a world like this, where things seem to be out of sync. All right. And I think it's once you maybe embrace, some people more than some have embraced this notion that they are eternal creatures, and when that happens, you sense the misalignment even more, and sometimes you want to understand why the misalignment is there, and the tools that will allow you to probe this carefully and properly are philosophical tools. So I do believe it's worth looking into it. But the mind-body problem is that in its essence. And because it embraces a fundamental contradiction, people that get to that point and still take it seriously then divide themselves into two. Well, really three camps. One camp says there's got to be a solution. There's got to be a way this stuff works together. There's got to be a way the mind interacts with the body. And they look into psychology, psychiatry, spiritualism. They try desperately to find this point of contact. Others say it's all matter. It's all matter. So they stop being a dualist. A dualist means that they believe in two essential but different substances. And they become a monist. A monist means they believe there's only one thing in the world. Now, the general monist is going to say there's only matter. It's only the atom, the electrons, the protons, the neutrons. So it's a physical substance. That's it. Now, these people have a huge problem explaining the agency of the human. We feel like we are a person. We feel like we have a free will, intelligence. We feel like we have memory, an understanding of the present, hope for the future. We feel like we can communicate intention and meaning and deliver it to other human beings. Our life is full of intention. Yet how can the pen have intention? And if you are of the same matter as the pen, and really, truly you are, the materialists are going to have to say that, then how in the world can you do this and the pen can't? You must be mistaken. Or the pen is somehow also a thinking substance. And thinking is a property of atoms. And it gets pretty hard. It devolves into a position full of faith as well. And in fact, the faith that's a little more complicated than the third result. Sometimes people look at these situations, they don't become a dualist. They become monist, but they don't become a materialist. They become a mentalist. In other words, there are plenty of people that say the world is a mental construct. We exist somewhere, but this is the language we have to live in, and the language is telling us something about ourselves. And this is not really physical. I mean, we don't get past sensation when we deal with the physical world. We never are going to get past sensation that occurs in our mind. If we do, it turns into math, which a mental entity is fine with. So, the fact that God can be this divine mind that's full of personality and intention and all the qualities that go with the mental existence: love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, patience, gentleness, all this, justice, anger, wrath. These are all mental qualities. And the fact that all of a sudden in a mental construct that is more or less stable, you might have something, you drop the pen and instead of going down, it goes up. Well, that's fine because it's a mental construct. So this might explain how a person can rise up to the clouds and when no one else can, or maybe walk on water. So there is a sense where mentalism is also a viable way out of the mind-body problem. It's a type of monism. Monism just says that you believe there is one essential quality out there of the world, one substance, but this substance is not matter, it's mind. So you're a mind. But that means that everything that you called physical before is not really there in the sense you think it's there. You can't get past it. Every time you reach out and you try to touch your computer, you're going to feel it because that's how the construct works. Okay, and you can operate within it. It's stable that way because but the mentalist will say it's all designed for deeper purposes. The physical world is a tool for the development. Well, see, the mentalist wouldn't say it's physical. The mentalist would say the construct that your mind is allowed to see as it discovers itself is there to be guardrails to the mind, so the mind is led into self-awareness. And that self-awareness, once you get it, can go two ways. Now, I'm digressing a little bit, but if you believe that deep self-awareness can save you, you are nothing more than a modern Gnostic. Okay, these are the Gnostic Gospels. This is Nag Hammadi. This is the gospel, the Coptic gospel of Thomas. This happened in the day of Jesus. This is nothing new. Okay, but the notion of that this divine spark in you is there for this mental construct to allow you to discover through the trauma that it brings upon your life. And if that spark saves you, then there's your way out. And what the other notion might be, this mental construct is here through the trauma it brings, what we would call death, and all the ways death shows up in your life on a daily basis. Okay, I'm not just talking about someone dying. I'm talking about also your pet dying. I'm talking about all the death you see in the world on a daily basis when you see the news. I'm talking about ideas dying. I'm talking about plants dying. I'm talking about your childhood dying. I'm talking about your hobby dying when you move on to another one. I'm talking about a parent watching their child leave home and say, well, that time of my life is dead, is over. It's now only memory. All right, so that's how death shows up in the world. And this mental construct. And if all of this is designed to get you to the point where you realize that you need something much bigger than you to remove this death, then the Christian is going to call that salvation. The Christian is going to call that the moment of faith when you realize you need God. And this is not Gnosticism anymore. This is Pauline Christianity. All right. So the person that looks at the mind-body problem and says materialism makes no sense. Dualism is an internal contradiction. Mentalism, maybe that's it. See, so you have three options before you as you battle the mind-body problem. One is to accept it and to say somehow we don't understand, but it works. Okay, so you're a dualist because you are saying that there are two substances in the world, the mind and matter, and somehow they interact. But then you might look at it and say, well, it's only matter. Okay, so become a materialist. I think you're going to eventually at the end you're going to regret that. But then you have the mentalist approach. We say it's all mind, and that solves the mind-body problem. But it puts you in a very awkward situation with the people around you because most people don't want to think this way. They don't want to deal with this problem. They don't really think it worthwhile. So that's where we are right now in our study of philosophy. Okay, and some of the movies now and the texts are going to look at these three worldviews, if you will, the decisions of the dualist, Life of Pi, okay, if you will, the materialist, and then the mentalist. So let's keep on moving forward. It's not an easy subject. It isn't. And the way I've designed our path through this is just to deal with major ideas and terms. Above all, I'm trying to keep it understandable and interesting. But this is just one path through the labyrinth. And once you get a grip and learn how to walk through this labyrinth, you can flip back and take another path through, and you get better and stronger. And then maybe you can learn how to study it in a different way, maybe historically. And you start with the pre-Socratics, and then the Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then the post-Socratics, and then you move on from there. It depends what you want to do with this and how your mind works with it. And some of you might be getting to get an interest here, and you need to realize, one, that's a rare thing. It could be a powerful thing, but you need to treat it with a lot of respect, and you need to go slowly, because philosophy done wrong will have its effects. So philosophy done right is incredible, okay? And it's there for the pilgrim to take it and to ease the path forward, okay? But it has to be done correctly, with respect and slowness and a true grasp of the core issues. All right, so we'll talk more about this later. Thank you for listening.